my name is Jami Sparano, and welcome to Sound Playground, Explore Worlds That Surround You. Just to start off with my thesis statement, sound has the power to impact human consciousness on neurological and psychological levels, thus altering our lives more profoundly than we may readily acknowledge. Particular sound waves or frequencies at the core of soundscapes and musical compositions influence thoughts, feelings, and expression in ways that directly inform how people will engage with the world around them. By understanding the relationship between sound frequencies and human consciousness, experiential designers can harness the effects soundscapes have in fabricated environments and how they can be composed in order to affect the quality of group dynamics, enhance learning outcomes, and aid in audience wayfinding. So, the big idea, just to package this up, sound affects everything. More importantly, sound is not just influential when it comes in the form of music. When we break it down on scientific levels, we can actually observe how that influences how we think and how we feel and sometimes who we become. So again, just to reiterate, the big idea is sound affects everything. The audience, and I will get into specifics shortly, but my primary audience in this case would be Massachusetts 4th grade students following the state's science and art curriculums that introduce properties of sound and music. Why is it 4th graders? Well, so in the state of Massachusetts, the current public school curriculum introduces not only the sound of science, but music education in the 4th grade. So, the secondary audience to the primary audience would be the family and caregivers with children who will be escorting these kids to the exhibit. And then the tertiary audience would be Boston tourists looking for a way to stimulate their city experience with something fun, educational, and unique. And why Massachusetts and why Boston? Because I have chosen the Museum of Science of Boston as my venue. Now, why the Museum of Science when there's so many different science exams in New York? You may ask me, Jamie, what's up with that? I have to say that the Museum of Science is particularly interesting because they have a wide-ranging audience that does not just appeal to younger kids. And I would consider 4th graders to be on the upper level of younger children. However, it's a good age to start introducing properties of like what would be consciousness and how we can raise awareness in themselves. And I believe that anything younger than 4th grade would be having that discussion a bit too early, as it's a kind of heady subject, and I believe that the Museum of Science would be able to appeal to that audience a bit better. Not to mention, the room in which I have chosen this exhibit to take place is on the lower level. There are 3 levels to this museum, but in the room that I have my exhibition, there are actually almost 4 closed walls other than the entrance and exit to this space. And that's really important when you're working with sound because you need to have control and you need to take great care of sound in the space. Since there are many elements that will be incorporating that, and since we are teaching sound, it's important to use a space that will take extra care of that. So, my interpretive approach. Sound Playground is a children's exhibition that aims to raise awareness of sound and soundscapes. In turn, this heightened awareness will help younger audiences gain a better sense of themselves and the worlds they inhabit through a unique and often overlooked lens. So, just to break this down, consciousness, super broad topic. However, in this case, I would interchange it with awareness. So when you're bringing awareness to soundscapes and to sound and how it makes somebody feel, you're also building a greater awareness of the self and how you react to certain things. So my interpretive approach for this exhibition would be taking the awareness of sound and using that as a means to become, or at least build a greater bond with themselves or yourself because of your awareness that you're finding through this newfound sensory approach. So my concept diagram, this is just kind of how I broke up my research bit by bit. Again, we're talking about sound sciences. This is not about music. However, I'll touch upon that in a second. So I just want to start with frequency functioning, which is how sound functions, whether that's physically. Moving on to nature's neurologic, which is how we process sound as humans and how that gets to the brain, and then how we interpret those sounds based off given biases, such as like our culture, our backgrounds, our age, what have you. And then also how we process sound if you are hard of hearing or if you have hearing handicaps. How adolescents process sound and how that is interpreted through learning opportunities. Environmental soundscapes. Now these are really important, and I am exploring soundscapes, whether that is in a fabricated environment such as ambient music, or some people know that as muzak or elevator music. But more importantly, what happens in like a natural environment, or when you're in the landscape itself. So when you think about New York City, you can think about tires hitting the pavement and then people walking against the sidewalk, airplanes going overhead, and what that soundscape creates. Because since that is what we are inhabiting, it's really important to talk about those soundscapes because they are incredibly influential. Moving on, talking about music compositions just a little bit, just to make note and understand how they are different from soundscapes themselves, compositionally and scientifically. And then finally, visualizing the movement, which is how we have visualized sound through time, as well as sound simplified, which is just breaking down all of this information and reprocessing it through the lens of everyday activities or environments or just things that we typically see. That way we can kind of take all this information and reorient it into things we understand, all under the guise of sound effects. So again, going back to that big idea, how sound affects us. An energy map, because this has to be a very careful exhibition in terms of it needs to have rhythmic flow, not because that's on theme, but also because there needs to be moments of reprieve to make sure our secondary audience has a bit of a break and kids aren't just bouncing around all over the place and there's not lessons being learned. So you'll notice they're in very high energy zones and then moves throughout neutral zones as well as low and very low zones, just to catch some reprieve and some breaks as well as some moments of reflection. And some different types of movements as well. It's not just all physically based, and that's really important. Moving on to the activities. So, the entry experience, that front hallway is super dim, so I thought it would be really nice to have some dimensional frosted acrylic panels that are internally lit that kind of welcome you into the space. The introduction graphics break down sound very simply. Again, this has to be layman's terms because this is for children, so you welcome them in with, have you ever considered how sound feels, how it looks, how it works? Sound defines so much of our lives and we hardly realize it. Open your mind and never mind your ears. Uncover the world around you at Sound Playground. So that is the welcoming wall. Moving into the secondary introduction graphic, that kind of introduces soundscapes, just to let the audience know that this is a conversation about sound. But more importantly, to think about the sounds in the worlds that they inhabit in the places that they live within, because it's really important to reflect upon those things. And this is just another way that we can compartmentalize this information for children and the different caregivers so that they understand what exactly it is about sound that this exhibition will be talking about. And again, sound affects everything. So the first area is talking about frequency functioning, which I had mentioned earlier in my concepts has to do with how sound functions, whether that's physically, and then the science behind sound. So we're talking about acoustics in this area. So the first one, sound will bounce. So sound does bounce, and in fact it does a lot, and that's how you understand echoes. So if you think about the Grand Canyon, that echoing effect, you're listening to sound bouncing in real time. So this is a great activity so that kids can learn how that works. With all these different trampolines that all have, I would say, an attunement to different tightnesses or looseness, because each trampoline pad would bounce at a different rate. So that bounciness represents the actual frequency wave, so that you can either get like a very rapid bounce or very slow and kind of, again, like rhythmic bounce. And then on the wall, as that bouncing is happening, you will have lights that match up to the different trampoline pads that go against the wall and kind of bounce from place to place until it eventually peters out, much like sound would. Next would be the frequency slide, and each one replicates its own sound wave. So you got high sound frequencies, medium sound frequencies, and low sound frequencies. And as you go down the slide, you get a residual sound effect that matches that frequency, and the slide itself lights up. Really incredible way to learn about the physicality of sound, and again, how it moves, and also how it can help you or make you feel. So it can be very high energy, you can get very excited moving around it. Next will be sound will bounce. And this is the simulated ear canal experience that helps teach how the neurological side of sound functions. So you go through this simulated ear canal all the way through this tensile eardrum structure that you can kind of see right here. And when you touch that tensile structure, you will get a low frequency bass tone as feedback, moving all the way to the cochlea, which is this winding tube that represents how fluid moves throughout the ear and also delivers information to the hair cells. And then this is in the form of a swing. So the information on the right depicts that when you are super hard on hair cells, you will have permanent hearing loss. So yes, play on these swings and have a good time on these swings. Each one is essentially set to a pre-designated amount of movement to represent the movement of the hair cell sending signals to the brain, but it's also good to have that context that if you play with them too hard, that's how damage or hearing loss occurs. Sound sensation is going onto the hearing handicap portion of the exhibition, and each one of these hollowed out aluminum structures are equipped with sound transducers. So if you think about a controller giving you vibrational feedback, it's the same thing, because when you have hearing loss, you are feeling sound rather than actually hearing it itself. So it's a good way to kind of touch back, and again, it's a nice reflective moment. Chromesthesia sketching is taking basically what is synesthesia, which is the experience of, like, let's say you're hearing sound, but you're tasting grapes. So it's taking that experience and allowing you to kind of draw along with music that's happening within the headset, or rather not so much music, but ambient soundscapes, because as those soundscapes change in the headphones, the reaction on the screen will change on your drawing movement. So let's say it's becoming more high frequency, the actual drawing device will become like pinks and purples as opposed to low frequencies, which will become blue. Condi Sandbox is the historical lesson of this exhibition, talking about, and also it is the introduction to how we visualize sound. So this is talking about how resonance works when sound meets materials. And when you put like sand or let's say salt on that material, that resonance will cause that sand to bounce when it's given a different frequency. And that bounciness will create a pattern on the plate. So this is replicated in the form of a sandbox playing into this, the playground trope. So that as you change the hertz, you'll see different patterns on the sandbox below. Spectrogram is how we take data-driven approaches to visualizing sound. So this is just a filter on a screen that takes the image in front of it and it transfers it into a changes the visual of what's on the screen when there's different audio inputs. So let's say it's very loud in the room. The depth and the color of the image will change, and that's based off real-life data that's taken in from actual spectrograms. And that is just a real-life scenario, so you can take this from the web, or it's also an Instagram filter, and it's the same concept. Ambient Thumper is a harp-like structure that allows for a nice peaceful moment where you pluck different strings and it gives you different natural elements of a soundscape. So think of rushing water or birds chirping or different sounds just out in nature. So it's really just focused on the natural side of a soundscape. A motion composer is where you turn different knobs on the wall after you read a given input below the knobs. And how this is important is that when you turn the knob, depending on how strongly you feel about the prompt that's below the knob, different sound will come out of those speakers. So let's say you feel very strongly about something, you will get a huge amount of audio feedback, and as different people input how they feel about things, you will be giving a symphonic moment to the input, so that you're all kind of building this symphony of sound together based on how you feel about something. The Emotion Composer Cloud is just, again, taking that onto the web. And so you feed it into a prompt, like how you feel about your day, and then AI technology will take that prompt and give you your own generated clouded sound. So as people give you different inputs into this web application, you'll be building a symphony together across the world. And then finally, Sound Simplified, just focusing in on like kind of a roundabout moment, like thinking about sound. It kind of has a talk-through point where it's basically saying like, so think about sound and soundscapes as you know them in your real life, and take it with you as you go, and just reflect on how you feel. And it'll give you, again, like as you move through the sound cones, it'll give you that narrative, as well as different soundscapes, such as like a city, or like out in nature, or like even generated ones, such as like ambient music. So the logo derives from sound waves, and this is really important because I wanted to take sound waves and break them apart and abstract them, which is how you see in the logo. It looks like people playing because it is sound waves, but it's taking them so that they represent abstracted form as well as organic movement, and most importantly, it represents play. The color palette, touching back to the signage, you can see how everything follows that prompt, and if you even look ahead, you will see a wavy structure, and that plays into this right here, so that each area has its own designated wiggle as well as color zone, just to represent. So as you move through the space, you understand which concept you are touching upon when you see the color and you see the representative wiggle. And again, that's what you see on the ceiling right there. So they all have those above them. Just the poster, and then how that looks within the lobby entrance of the Museum of Science Boston. Just some collateral from the museum store. This is a sound machine that you can purchase and take home, and it'll play rain sounds, whatever you need it to do. Yeah, basically different audio soundscapes that would basically help you sleep, help you work, help you focus, what have you. And that is it. Thank you so much. That was Sound Playground, and I really appreciate your time. I hope you liked it.